Buongiorno, benvenute e benvenuti al webinar Loescher danno del titolo Reading Sherlock, Reading Strategies to Build Vocabulary. Il webinar rientra nella programmazione e supporto della didattica a distanza promossa dalle case editrici Loescher e Danna insieme a Helbling English, tenendo conto delle esigenze didattiche emerse a seguito dell'emergenza sanitaria che obbliga alla chiusura delle scuole. Interverrà Nora Nagy, insegnante di inglese come lingua straniera e ricercatrice universitaria. Tra i suoi campi di ricerca, multimodalità semiotica, didattica museale e lo sviluppo dell'abilità di scrittura in lingua inglese. Nora è anche coautrice del Helbling Readers blog e ha adattato per la serie Helbling Readers The Age of Innocence di Edith Wharton, che abbiamo appena saputo di essere nominato finalist nel prestigioso Language Learning Literature Award. Buon webinar.
Thank you, Maria. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our second session on this platform. Today, we are going to read a passage from a chapter from a Sherlock Holmes story, and we are going to look at reading strategies on building vocabulary for A2 level learners. So, first, we will meet Sherlock Holmes. We will talk about him a bit and check some vocabulary. And we will then read chapter 1 from this graded reader for A1, A2 levels. We will read the first story because there are two stories in this reader. And we are going to do then three exam practice activities for A2 key Cambridge exams. Then I will give you a couple of summary tips, ideas on how you can continue reading, and also some ideas how you can explore the world of Sherlock Holmes a little bit more. So let's start the session. First of all, to become familiar with Sherlock Holmes, can you please type in the chat box the name of the guy with the red arrow? So the red arrow is pointing at who? Yes, we have the first answer. When you have written your first answer, okay, that's easy, everyone got it right. Who is the second person? Who is the blue arrow pointing at? Okay, that's Dr. Watson. All right. Let's see, I have also answered. So that's Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. So Sherlock is a detective. That's something that we should know. He lives at 220B Baker Street, London, and his friend and assistant is Dr. Watson. All right. Now let's look at some of the typical features that have helped you identify these two characters. So, what does Sherlock Holmes look like? I have highlighted does and look like because this might be a bit more difficult for students at A2 level. So can you please list a couple of words which describe his physical features? Someone is saying he's tall. That's true. Slim, he has a long nose. Tall, slim, he's wearing a hat. He looks skinny. That's nice. All right. Any more ideas? What is he wearing? He's wearing a coat. All right. So let me show you the words that I have collected here. So he is tall and thin. He has a narrow face and a thin nose. He looks elegant. He's wearing a coat and a typical hat. For higher level students, we could also mention that this is also called an overcoat, and sometimes he wears a cape. And he's wearing a hat. Can anybody tell me the name of the hat he is wearing? This might be a bit difficult for A2 levels, but he's also wearing a white shirt. All right. Deer stalker. Yes, Paul is saying that's a deer stalker. So that's the special name of the hat he is wearing. Thank you. All right. So now let's move on and look at two other typical features that you can mention. So in the previous picture, he wasn't holding a pipe and he wasn't holding a magnifying glass, but two other typical objects he usually has are the pipe and his magnifying glass. All right. And sometimes a violin. Yes, somebody mentioned that, Sonia. Thank you. All right. So we have talked about his physical features. Now we could talk about his character, his personality. So what is Sherlock Holmes like? Can you please write a couple of adjectives to describe his personality? Calm, stubborn and clever, sharp, logical, thoughtful, witty. There are some really good words coming in. All right. Knowledgeable and arrogant. Nice words. He's creative. All right. Okay, now let's see the verse that I have collected. I have said that he is intelligent, but apart from being intelligent, he is also knowledgeable. This might look like a difficult word, but I'm sure that your students will understand it. If you just look at the root, know, knowledge, knowledgeable, so we know that he's also an educated man and he knows a lot. He's also very curious. He's interested in all sorts of crimes. He's logical and observant. That's how he solves crimes. He's also proud, funny, and musical. Someone has mentioned violin before, and that was a good comment because we know that he also likes music. So these are a couple of words that you can use just to describe him. All right. And let's move on and talk about what he does. All right, we know that he's a detective, but what does a detective do? What are the main activities that a detective has to know and do? Investigate with logic. All right, and what else? He observes, that's good. Think about a couple of more words. Deduce, connect, search the truth, calculate, examines, collects proof, look for details. These are all really, really good. Yes, these are all really good thinking skills as well that we can also practice, not only in our daily lives, but also when we are learning a language. That's very good. So these are just a couple of words that I have collected. So he listens, he observes, he asks questions. He's a good listener, and as he listens, he also observes the person who he's listening to. He asks the right questions, and this is how he investigates crimes and finally solves his problems. Okay. So apart from remembering that this is what a detective does, I think it's a good thing to remember that this is what we can also do when we are reading a text or listening to someone in the language class. So you can keep a language notebook and act like Sherlock Holmes and listen, observe, and ask questions, and also take notes of the things that you have observed. All right. So the story we are reading today is Sherlock Holmes and the Stolen Jewels. And as you can see that in this the graded reader, you can see two stories. The first one is the adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, and the second one is the adventure of the Burial Coronet. We are going to work with the first text today. So what do we have to know in terms of vocabulary? A jewel is a precious stone and the gemstone can be described as a mineral crystal. You also can check that the jeweler is a person who makes and sells jewelry, and you can think about different types of jewels, and then explain that the carbuncle is a really precious gemstone. The second story you remember is the Burial Coronet. So it's a green, blue, yellow, red, or white gemstone. And the coronet is a small crown, so you can usually see gemstones in jewelry or in crowns as well. Can you tell me any other jewels or gemstones that you know? Can you write them in the chat box? Yes, nice. Diamond. Nice. Amber. Sapphire. Nice. Thank you. So let's move on with the story. So The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle is one of the 56 Sherlock Holmes stories by Arthur Conan Doyle. It was published in 1892 in the Strand magazine. Most of the Sherlock Holmes stories were published in this magazine. It is set in the center of London, and the time is just after Christmas. So it is also a perfect Christmas story. All right. So when you look at this picture, can you name two very important details? What can you see in this picture? The goose. And what else? What is the goose holding in its beak? Feather, leaves, holding a diamond, someone is saying, a letter. Okay, look at the color. It's blue. So, and the title of someone is asking, it might look like, yes, it's shiny. It looks like a mirror. The color is light blue. You remember that the title of the story is The Blue Carbuncle. So we can probably all agree that this is a goose. Remember that the plural is geese, and the goose is holding a blue carbuncle. Now you don't have to write it in the chat box here now, but just take a note and try to remember or imagine what might happen to the goose and the carbuncle in the story. And when we have read the first chapter, you can check if your predictions if your predictions were right. Someone is asking, like, is it the thief? We don't know yet. This is something that you can think about right before you start reading the story. All right. So here are a couple more things that we already know. So the story is set around Christmas, so this might be a Christmas goose. He's holding a precious gemstone. We know that Sherlock Holmes is involved somehow, who solves problems, so maybe there's a lost stone. So people can think about what might happen to the precious stone and the goose. This is why it's important to predict what will happen, because this will help you become interested in the story. So let's move on to reading. We are going to read the first chapter. It's called The Old Hat. This double page is a typical page from a reader. You will see a lot of illustrations in each story, and you will also see, if you look at the first paragraph, you will also see that there is a small icon. So you can listen to these stories as well on Helbling. You can download the audio files. It's important that there might be a lot of words or new words for your students and for us that are unknown. And these words are marked with a red dot. And you can see the glossary, where the words are either explained in very simple definitions, or you can see images sometimes, which make it even easier to understand the meaning of these words. So We will start reading soon. Before that, let's look at the illustrations. So, because it will help us activate some of the vocabulary and imagine what might happen in the first chapter. So, who are the two men? Can you quickly write it in the chat box, please? The owners, two gentlemen. Look at the face of that man and look at what he is holding. Someone is making a nice deduction. It's Holmes because there's a pipe. Victims of a theft. Why do you think that they are victims of a theft? What do they look like? Nora. They look very sad and desperate. All right. If you look at this man and if you look at his face, do you remember how we described Sherlock? And that he's thinking he's holding a magnifying glass. So I can tell you that Sherlock Holmes is the one lying on the sofa, and Dr. Watson is standing next to him. So now we know that this is Sherlock Holmes on the sofa, and can you tell me what he's holding in his right hand? A magnifying glass. Okay. Very nice. All right. So, can you tell me what he's wearing? Before he was wearing a coat, and now he's wearing a really elegant. All right, someone is saying it's a suit. It looks very elegant. Sherlock was a really fashionable man. But all the people who are saying that he's wearing a dressing gown, they are right. He's wearing a purple dressing gown. Okay, what's on the chair? The old hat. A hat. Yes. Very nice. So there is a black hat on the chair. And what is the focus of their attention? What is the focus of attention here? The two men are looking at. You follow the little lines coming out of their eyes. We can all agree that they are looking at the hat. So, and the title of the chapter is the old hat. So we can see that this is the focus of attention here. All right. So we will start reading the first chapter now. And let me give you a reading tip before that. It's always a good idea to focus on the main plot and ask questions about the plot. So when I will read the first paragraph, I would like you to focus on these 5 questions. When does the story begin? Who tells the story? Who found the hat and the goose? Where did he find them? And when did he find them? So, when, who found it, the hat and the goose, where and when. I will give you some time now to read this paragraph. And remember to answer 5 questions. Note them down, please. To the 5 questions. When does the story begin? Who tells the story? Who found the hat and the goose? Where did he find them and when did he find them? Okay, so the first question, let's see. When does the story begin? Two days after Christmas. All right, answers are coming in now, I can see. Good, very good. Can you tell me who tells the story? It's in the first sentence again. Yes, it's Watson. Very good. You can spot it in the first sentence. All right, third question. Who found the hat and the goose? Peterson? Nice. You're quick. Good. Thank you. Where did he find them? Where did he find them? Exactly. Tottenham Court Road. Yes, nice. And finally, when did he find them? 4 o'clock on Christmas morning. All right, so let's move on. I have highlighted the answer for you. So the story begins 2 days after Christmas when John Watson, who is telling the story, visited his friend. Um, the hat and the goose were found by Peterson, the doorman, and they were found about 4 o'clock on Christmas morning. And when did he find them? He found them on Tottenham Court Road in the center of London. All right. So these are just interesting questions to check the main plot because there is quite a lot of happening in the story. So it's a good idea to keep track of all these main events. Now, still working with the same text, let me point out these words in red. So you can see sofa, dressing gown, a magnifying glass, solve a crime, doorman, owns it, and goose. These words might be new for you, so you can either check the meaning at the bottom of the page, or you can check the illustration to understand the meaning of the words, or you can also probably guess some of the words from the context. These are 3 tips that you can remember if you like to understand new vocabulary. All right, moving on. I can give you 2 more tips about reading, and these tips are useful not only for reading this story, but also any kind of story. First, learn from Sherlock and think about observing and describing objects very carefully. So here is a description. Beside the sofa was a wooden chair with an old hat on the back of it. The hat was dirty, and Holmes was looking at the hat through his magnifying glass. So you can use a lot of vocabulary to describe different objects. And then it's also a good idea to collect facts. There are 3 facts. About 4 o'clock on Christmas morning, Peterson was returning from a party. He was walking along Tottenham Court Road in the center of London. In front of him, he saw a tall man carrying a white goose over his shoulder. So we will work a bit more with these 2 reading tips. All right. Carrying on, I would like you to focus on how objects are described in this next sequence paragraphs from the story. Can you please find words which describe the hat here? Read the passage, please, and then just in the chat box write as many words as you can to describe the hat. Ordinary, round, hard, old, If you read on in the same paragraph, you will see even more information you can collect. Somebody's saying it's greasy. There's no label, there are brown stains, HB initials, there's black ink on it. All right. All right, nice. It's oily. Nice. As you can see, just in this one paragraph, if you look at the slide now, in this one paragraph, there's a lot of information to talk about the hat. And I have highlighted a really important sentence from Sherlock Holmes here. He says, "No, Watson, you can see everything," Holmes replied, "but you can't tell me what you see." This sentence is really important because it reminds us that even if we see something, we also have to find the right words to describe them meaningfully. And passages like this help us understand how much information we can give about an object, for example. So these clues and facts can help us solve crime. So let's see how much you remember. The hat was, you can see this new illustration here. You can see that there's a hat and it was, can you please remember, write a couple of words in the chat box? Round, no initials, labeled, it had stains on them. You can't really see the stains. If you look carefully, maybe we see some stains. There, we can clearly see the capital letters. We can see even more in these pictures because we can also see the goose, and we can see a small card on the leg of the goose as well, behind the hat. So let's see. A very ordinary black hat is round and hard, very old and very dirty. There's no label to show the maker's name, but we can see the initials HB, which are written on one side. We can see brown stains in several places, and we can see black ink on it to hide the stains. So what can we learn from this, working with facts? Sherlock says that from all this information, we can understand that the man was very intelligent. He was rich about 3 years ago. He is poor now. He doesn't go out much. He is middle-aged. He has grey hair, which was cut a few days ago, and he puts a special cream on it. So if we pay attention to details, we can actually learn a lot about a person. So how do we know this? In the next chapter, or in the next section, you get all the answers from Sherlock to these questions. I will give you a few seconds to read this passage now. Try to memorize some of the answers to the 3 questions. How did you know this man was intelligent? How do you know the man is not rich? And how do we know that he is middle-aged, that his hair is grey, and that it was recently cut, and that he uses special cream? Okay. I will move on now, and you can write the first answer in the chat box. So how do you know that this man was intelligent? He had a large brain. Alright, so the man had a big, large brain because the hat was really big. Okay, good. How do you know? Second question. How do you know that the man is not rich? Enrique is saying that the hat is best quality, but it's 3 years old. Really good comment. The hat is 3 years old. And it's not only 3 years old, but as some of you are writing, it's also really good quality. But we can also guess that he is poor now because we can see stains and black ink. So we can imagine that he hasn't bought a hat for a long time. Very good answers. And how do we know that he's middle-aged and that his hair is gray, that it was recently cut, and that he uses special cream? What were the clues? Someone is saying lots of trimmed hair inside it, cream perfume, crease stains, smell of hair cream, very good. Smell. So that's about the cream. But the others are saying that you can see gray hair inside. Very good. Excellent answers. You have really good memory. Okay, now let's see the answers in the text. We know that the hat is quite large. The man has a large brain, so he must have something in it. We know that the hat is 3 years old. It is best quality, and it was an expensive hat 3 years ago. We can see from looking inside the hat that there are a lot of hair ends cut by scissors of the barber, and there's a strong smell of hair cream. You all remembered it very well. Excellent. So such reading helps us work with facts. So in your language notebook, as you are reading a Sherlock Holmes story, you can either take notes or just try to remember what clues and what facts we can collect and how different objects help us understand what's going on. So here, for example, I have collected information about the man, and we can also see how we know this. Somebody is saying that this is the empirical method, and it's a really good point. This is how we collect information, and then we can analyze that information. So he was very intelligent. He wears a large hat. He was rich about 3 years ago. The hat is best quality from 3 years ago. And so on. So you can carry on collecting information this way. Nice. All right. So let's check some vocabulary now. We are moving on to work a bit more with vocabulary. Can you remember 2 words that you can solve? What are the 2 things that you can solve? You can solve a case, crime. All right, let's see what you are saying. Lots of answers coming in so quickly. So nice. Okay, so it was crime and problems. All right, we are moving on. What can you use to make things larger? What does a detective use to make things larger? Yes, a magnifying glass. Good. Moving on. Write down the name of the large white bird in this story. Goose. All right. Do you remember the plural form? Excellent. Lots of answers coming in very quickly. Very nice. All right. Now, one goose and two geese. Nice. All right. Now we will move on to some exam practice preparation. And we will first start with the reading and writing exercises in the A2 key reading exam, which is a part one multiple choice exam text, in which you will have to read 6 short real word texts for the main message only. Now, if you look at this page from chapter 2, you will see that there is a small box saying reward for the return of the blue carbuncle, £1,000, please contact the police. So this is exactly the type of exercise that you will see in an exam. Next to such a box, you will have 3 answers, A, B, or C, and these answers are always very similar, but you have to check carefully all the information. And can you give me the right answer here? Everyone is saying B, 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 B. You will get £1,000 if you give the blue carbuncle back. Okay, when you check the right answer, it's also a good idea to check why the other 2 answers are wrong. So is the police selling the blue carbuncle? Not really, because you have to return it. And you are getting a reward, so it is not the price. The blue carbuncle costs £1,000. We don't know how much it costs, because again, you only get it as a reward if you return it and contact the police first. All right, so this is part one multiple choice activity type. Moving on, I will show you another example from the exam. Part 3 is a multiple choice exercise. You will have to read a long text in the exam, and you will have to read this long text for the detailed understanding and main ideas. These texts are usually between 200 and 300 words, so I have selected a similar text. I would like you to read this text first, and then I will give you some questions which are very similar to the exam. All right. I will give you the questions. I'm a really slow reader, and I have managed to read it. So maybe you have also finished reading it. Okay. So in the A2P reading exam, you will have 5 questions in part 3 after the text. You will get similar questions to these 5 questions. A good idea at this point is not to immediately circle the right answer, but first just highlight the questions for yourself, go back to the text and find the answers to the 5 questions in the text. So this is what we are going to do now. Who was carrying the goose? The small group of men. What was Peterson's job? How did Sherlock know who the tall man was? And Peterson gave the goose to Sherlock because. So first I highlighted the answers for myself. So we have information about a small group of men. One of them took the man's hat. Peterson was in his doorman's uniform. He dropped his goose and ran away. There was a small card on the bird's left leg. There were some words on this card. The initials HB, we have already seen before, were inside the hat. And we know that Sherlock loves solving problems. So we have detected where the possible answers might be. And now we can go back to the questions and say, so who was carrying the goose? And it was a tall man. The small group of men took the man's hat, so it's A. What was Peterson's job? He was a doorman. He was wearing a doorman's uniform, so it's B. How do we know who the tall man was? There was a card on the bird's leg. And Peterson gave the goose to Sherlock to solve a mystery. Here again, it's also a really good idea to check the wrong answers if you have the time, because that can help you with understanding how the exam questions try to confuse you, maybe even by giving you very similar answers. All right, moving on. After part 1 and part 3, I will show you a typical example for part 4. It's a multiple choice clause where you have to read a factual text and choose the correct vocabulary items to complete the gaps. So what does it look like? You will get a very short text. You will have 4 questions under it, and you have to pick the right word for each gap. Here, it's really important that the gaps usually contain a verb, a noun, maybe a preposition, and the answers are very similar to each other. And you might have to know the collocation, or you might have to know the right word to use in that context. So this is why vocabulary development during reading is very important. So let's see. All right. Some of you are giving me the answers. It's a magnifying. Sorry, I will go back. So it's a magnifying glass in one. And beside the sofa was a wooden chair. And why are you thinking, looking, or wearing? So with dirty old hat, you might think that it is wearing or thinking about, but you also have to check what before and after each gap. And after the gap, here you can see at. And we know that looking at, look and at usually go together. So you are looking at the dirty old hat. And we have learned before that you can solve a crime. So this is also a typical expression. You solve a crime. So here the answer is A. So, okay. So just to summarize some of the reading tips here for exam preparation, you can remember to first, when you are reading a paragraph or any kind of section, always ask who, when, why, where questions, because these will help you work with multiple choice exam questions. Then always look out for interesting expressions and phrases, words that always go together, because these will be the questions in multiple choice close exercises. And then always pay attention to detail. Simply, you can be just like Sherlock Holmes. You observe and collect facts and take notes in your language notebook. Okay, now we don't have much time left, so let me give you a couple of ideas on how you can summarize the story. You remember that we have visited some places as we were reading the first chapter already. So you can go on Google Maps. This map I created in about a few minutes. It's in Google, and you have to type in My Maps. That's where you can create maps and then change the layout and the colors of the map. But you can simply just use Google Maps and look for these places. So I have entered Baker Street, Tottenham Court Road, Good Street, the British Museum, Oxford Street, Bloomsbury, Covent Garden, and Brixton Road. These are all places that you will read about in the story. So what you can do, you can mark these places on a map, and then you can try to remember and tell yourself or write notes about what happened in each place. This is good for practicing vocabulary and also the past tenses as well. All right, so tip number one, try to track the story on a map, and it will help you with exploring London. You can even check what these places look like in the illustrations, and then you can go and check some photos of these places using Google Maps. Another idea I can give you, you can always use the illustrations to summarize the story. For example, at the beginning of the reader, you will see the main characters. So you can describe the characters and tell us or tell each other why these characters are important, what was their role in the story, what did they do, why were they important. So first the maps, and then you can use the illustrations. There are a lot more illustrations, of course, that you can use from the reader. This is just one example. So maybe now you can think back and think a bit more about and give me predictions about what the adventure of the Blue Carbuncle is and what do you think happened to the Blue Carbuncle. So even after the first chapter, you already have some ideas about how the goose and the precious gemstone are connected. If you have some ideas, what might happen, you can write it in the chat box. Someone says the goose eats the carbuncle. The goose will be roasted. Yes, it's a Christmas goose, so probably he will be eaten. All right. So if you keep reading the story, you will find out more about what happened to the blue carbuncle. And you can also see how Sherlock solves the whole mystery. All right. So if you continue reading, here are my tips. Observe things like Sherlock. You remember those slides where we talked about the hat, the facts, and what we learn about the man. So that's something that you can do as you read the following chapters. So collect facts as well. Always check vocabulary. You can use the glossary, the illustrations, and the context. I think that these three are enough. If you really don't understand them, maybe you can use the dictionary as well, but you will probably be fine just using the glossary and the illustrations. Use the illustrations to remember details. There's quite a lot going on, as we have said before. So the illustrations might help you remember the details, and always try to predict what might happen next. So you can always check what you imagine that what really happened, if they are true. All right. If you want to learn more about Sherlock Holmes, you can check the Helbling Readers blog, where we have a really nice collection of project ideas to learn more about London, to learn about Sherlock Holmes and his stories. And if you want to do some language practice, you can check eZone, where you can find self-correcting language practice to do before, during, and after reading, and you can listen to the story as well. And finally, if you want to read a bit more about Sherlock and you want to learn more with him, we have 3 more stories that you can read. I don't think it's a bad idea, and this is not only me, but usually reading research said that it's a good idea if you read on your own. It's a good idea to read under your level because this will give you more confidence and you might want to read more and more in a foreign language. So even if you are at an A2 level, it's a really good idea to read a story at A1 or A1 and A2 levels because this will be really motivating and this will also give you a lot of confidence. And finally, you can follow us for more ideas. I recommend our Facebook page, the Readers blog, our YouTube channel, our Instagram page, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter on our website or email us for more support. Thank you very much for spending this hour with us today, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Nora.
Thank you very much. Bye.